Welcome back everyone. Hi, if you're new, I'm Tori, and today I am finally sharing with you an epic list of fall recommendations. I think this might be the largest fall recommendations video I've ever done before. Some of these books are old favorites that I haven't mentioned in a while, but if you have been with the channel for a while, then you are definitely going to recognize several of these. But then I have some that are brand new recommendations, books that I have mentioned in wrap-ups before or maybe gushed about earlier this year, but have never officially been in a recommendations video before. So I'm really excited that so many of these books are finally in one video together. I feel like a lot of the books I recommended last year were a little bit darker in nature, but this year there is a little more variety, and I am leaning more into books that I just think you can, just curl up with and would make for really good reads to lose yourself in for the fall season. I hope you guys enjoy this video, get comfortable, and let's get into it. Kick things off with Wanderers by Chuck Wendig. I do realize that I just said the books this year are not all going to be as dark in nature, and I start things off with a pandemic/apocalyptic novel. This book is almost 800 pages, and to me there is just nothing better than curling up with a chunky book when the weather starts getting a little bit colder and you have a good cup of tea or coffee or something and a chunky blanket. So this is perfect. We do have multiple POVs throughout the story, but one of our primary characters is this young woman named Shanna, and one night she notices that her sister seems to be sleepwalking. She can't wake her up, nothing is working, and so she just ends up following her sister, who is just walking in a daze pretty much. And pretty soon a lot of other people start walking alongside Shanna's sister in what seems to be this really strange sleepwalking pandemic that's going on. And no one knows what they're walking toward, like what's happening. So there's just a lot of intensity and mystery surrounding that alone. But through one of our other characters in this book, we also get a more like science side of things, and as they're trying to uncover what exactly is happening. So I really enjoyed this overall, and I do think Chuck Wendig does such a good job, sustaining that mystery and just kind of drawing that out as the story goes on. So I do recommend Wanderers. I'm not quite sure yet when I'm going to get to book 2, but it is on my radar. Next, I'm recommending Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. This was so good. This is a middle grade fantasy novel, and I just had so much fun with this book. Amari is probably one of my favorite characters that I've read in 2023. She is so courageous, and she is not afraid to stand up for her friends, for what she believes in. This book is just pure magic and fun and adventure. We have our main character Amari Peters, and her older brother Quentin has been missing, but unlike everybody else around her, Amari still believes that her brother is alive and out there somewhere, and she makes it her mission to find out what happened to him and what's been going on. But at the start of the book, she gets this nomination to try out for a spot at the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs, and from there her world is completely rocked because she finds out that all of these supernatural creatures are real. She finds out these wizards have been wreaking havoc on the supernatural world. All of that sends her into a spiral that is not only dangerous, but is, could be getting her closer to finding out what is happening with her missing brother. Again, this was so good. I also really enjoyed the side characters in this. Even though this book takes place in the summertime, I just think just based on the supernatural aspect alone and just how magical this feels, this is gonna make such a perfect fall read. If this has been on your radar, or if it's been on your TBR, I highly recommend you get to this. She's such a fantastic character. I love her so much, and I will be reading book 2. The next few books I'm recommending are books that I just think would make for great reads to curl up with, worlds to lose yourself in, characters to fall in love with, that sort of vibe. So next is The Blighted Stars by Canon EOS. This is the first book in this author's new sci-fi series, The Devoured Worlds, and book 2 actually just recently came out. And this one came out at the beginning of the year, so the publishing schedule for this is moving fast. But I thought this first book was a great entry in what could be just a really solid sci-fi series overall when the trilogy concludes. In this world, we have these corporate families, and one of them is the Mercator family, and they are responsible for expanding on different planets, for mining on different planets. But it turns out that their mining practices have been responsible for destroying the planets that they visit. And so one of our main characters, Tarquin, he is the heir to this entire Mercator operation, and his father sends him to this planet to do a survey mission and to oversee the mining practices. But we have our other main character, Naira, and she has tried in the past to expose this family for their practices and to prove that they have been destroying these other worlds. And so Naira disguises herself as Tarquin's bodyguard, and the two of them, along with some other workers for the Mercator family, crash land on this planet, and the secrets just begin spilling out. There is a relationship that begins to develop between Naira and Tarquin that I wasn't completely on board with. It just wasn't my favorite aspect of the book. The mystery elements and the corporate family dynamics and politics I thought was far more interesting than what was happening between the two of them. But overall, I thought this was such an enjoyable read. I will be reading book 2, and this is so chunky. I think this is just going to be so great if it is cold outside and you just want to lose yourself in a good story. Next, I'm recommending one of my favorite sci-fi books that I've read in 2023, and that is The Stars Undying by Amari. This is such a slow burner. This book gives off the vibe, you know, that you just wake up and it's like, you know, 35, 40 degrees outside, all the leaves have changed, and you just pour yourself a large cup of coffee and settle into this story and in this world and watch things unfold. This is so good. And actually, this book is a retelling of the lives of Cleopatra, Julius Caesar, and Mark Antony. And it is a hot mess. Our main character, Altagracia, is a twin, and after her father dies, her sister takes control of the entire planet. And throughout the course of the book, Gracia is scheming so hard to win back her throne and take control of this planet again. But in order to do that, she has to align herself with the commander, who is supposed to be Julius Caesar. That entire relationship dynamic in this book is just so fascinating. What I love about this book is how unreliable Gracia is. She will be telling you something in one chapter, and then, you know, there's this whole like battle and political scheming that's been set up, and then, you know, 50 pages later, she's like, you know, actually, I'm so sorry I lied to you. That did not happen that way. What I said was not true. And then she tells you what really happened. And it is just so wild. It doesn't happen often throughout the book, but it happens enough to the point where you feel like you can't fully trust her and what she has up her sleeve and what's going on. I do think the sci-fi elements in this book are a bit on the low side. This reads very political, historical almost. I thought it was such a satisfying reading experience. So if this sounds great to you, this is one I highly recommend curling up with when the weather starts getting colder. Everyone is not going to love this though, because it is, sometimes it could feel painfully slow, but it just worked for me. I loved it so much. Next, I'm recommending Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the first book in the Founders trilogy. This is another one that I read in 2023, and I feel like the world building in this and the magic system and even the character dynamics and their relationships is something that you're really going to want to lose yourself in this fall season. This magic system is one of the most unique ones I think I've read since I started the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. In the world, we have a system known as scribing, and these scribers, they essentially can alter an inanimate object's reality and convince it to think it's something that it's not, or do something that it's not, or support something that, you know, if it was a weaker object would make the structure collapse. So it is just so fascinating the way that it works. What I really love about the story is just how detailed the magic system becomes. There's a lot of history behind it, and as you go along in the story, the history behind the system feels really almost philosophical, kind of academic, very science-like. So I do think that could work well if you're looking for something like that this time of year. But also the world building in this I think is so fascinating. We have these merchant houses in the book, and if you're affiliated with one in particular, you have a more cushiony life than, you know, someone on the outskirts. And so our main character in this is Sanchia, and she is a really skilled thief. And at the beginning of the book, she ends up stealing something that was intended for someone at a merchant house. And this object that falls into her hands could, you know, completely change the way that this world views scribing. And it could be, you know, completely catastrophic in the wrong hands. There's also a heist and found family element to the story that I know a lot of readers tend to appreciate this time of year, especially as we get into Thanksgiving and Friendsgiving and just spending more time with loved ones. I really enjoyed Sanchia as a main character. I do think some of the other secondary characters didn't really grow on me throughout the book the way that I thought they would. There is one in particular though that I thought was a really strong character aside from Sanchia, but the rest of them, I want to see how, you know, those relationships continue to develop over the course of the trilogy, because just from reading this book alone, Sanchia was the only one who I felt, you know, really connected to as a reader. So we'll see where things go in the trilogy, but if you're just looking for, again, an immersive world to kind of lose yourself in as the weather gets colder, this is one that I highly recommend. Let's get into some favorites now. I love any excuse to talk about this series, and that is the Empire of the Wolf trilogy. It's not finished yet, by Richard Swan. Book 1 is Justice of Kings, and the second book is The Tyranny of Faith. If the third book ends on a high note, this is about to be one of my all-time favorite trilogies. I love these books. And actually, The Justice of Kings is a book that I think was in my winter recommendations last year. This entire first book is so atmospheric, and you can just feel the cold as the characters are walking through this town. In this first book, it's just always cold and raining, and I think like Foundryside, it is just an atmosphere that you can just completely get lost in. So I love Justice of Kings more so for like a winter recommendation, but it's really because of The Tyranny of Faith that I am going to recommend you read both of these in the fall, because Tyranny The second half of Tyranny of Faith is a mess, like in the best way. This is a fantasy series, but a lot of times in Justice of Kings, the fantasy elements feel a little bit, you know, kind of on the low end of things. But then in Tyranny, especially in the second half, not only is Richard Swan bringing in the heavy fantasy elements, but there's also some intense moments of horror that happen in the second half of this book. I love both of these. I still think between the two of them, Justice is my favorite, but the two of them together are perfect. We have two main characters in this. The first one, whose story is unfolding, is Von Vault, Justice Von Vault. But his story is unfolding through the eyes of his young apprentice and his clerk Helena. And these two books become such a deep exploration of power and morality, and who has the right to hold that much power. What role does the law have when it comes to religion, if those two should mix? It is just so fascinating. I love these books. Next, let's get into two books that I'm currently reading. The first one here is honestly about to become my whole personality. It is my obsession at the moment. I'm loving everything happening in this book, and that is The Helm of Midnight by Marina Lostadter. I think it's going to be a trilogy of it's called The Five Penalties. This first book is incredible. It is so good and it is so dark. Oh my god, I really don't even know where to start describing this book. There is truly so much happening right now. The extremely basic setup for this story is we have a world where we have these masks, and they can contain the echoes or, you know, like the spirit of someone who has passed away. If there was someone prominent in the society, like a healer, you know, somebody like that who wants to pass on their knowledge or anything when they die, you can have an enchanter imbue that into a particular mask. And so anybody who wears it can then have the knowledge that that individual had in life. And so at the beginning of this book, a mask that has the echo or the spirit of a serial killer is stolen. And whoever stole the mask is now committing crimes that are, you know, that resemble what the serial killer did when they were alive. Okay, so stay with me here. So our main character is a regulator, like a detective in this world. She is trying to find this mask and find out what's going on and try to stop these murders from occurring. But what I am loving about this book is that we have different timelines, and the things that are happening in those timelines are informing what is happening in the present day and how this investigation unfolds. It is truly incredible. But also what's going on in terms of world building, there are just so many elements to it. Just the magic, the way that the law enforcement is set up, the role that religion plays in all of this, and it's so good. It really, really is. I'm a little bit past the midway point. I love this book. I think this might be one of my other favorites of the year. This has been a great reading experience, but yeah, that one's a little dark. Then my other current read, which has been such a pleasant surprise that I'm enjoying it, is Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. I didn't really have any expectations going into this book. It's always kind of been on my radar, but it wasn't until I saw the first episode of the AMC show, and I was like, oh, that's, you know, it's kind of interesting. I think I should go back and read the source material now. So I stopped the show and I went back and I picked up the book. And this has been so good so far. I'm sure a lot of you might be familiar with the story of Interview with the Vampire, even if you've never read the book before, never seen the movie, never seen the show. But you just have this vampire, Louis, who is telling the story of his life. He's this centuries-old vampire. But the writing in this and the way that he is relaying information, the way that we flow in and out of scenes, I think is so amazing. And Louis, he is just doing so much self-reflecting while he's telling the story, but he's also really grappling with, you know, with what he is pretty much. There's a lot of talk about religion and God, and you can see him really struggling with that. And then of course we get into that toxic relationship that he has with the vampire Lestat, who transformed him into a vampire. The prose in this, the way that it flows, is just so beautiful in this almost haunting way. I do want to wrap this up soon along with The Helm of Midnight, but yeah, these two have turned out to be really great surprises for me. Go pick those up if you haven't done so already. Now let's get into something a little bit darker. I'm gonna recommend The Good House by Tanana Reevdu. This is incredible. This is one of my favorite books that I've read in 2022. It made my best books of the year. I'm a Tanana Reevdu stan. I'm so excited for her new book, The Reformatory, to come out. I'm also gonna be reading The Between this month. I love her work so much. I think she is such a phenomenal writer. The Good House, this is a piece of art. This is a horror novel, and there are really some disturbing moments in this book. Our main character is Angela Toussaint, and she has inherited her grandmother's home, and she's having a 4th of July party there, and her son Corey dies at this party. And from there, the story skips ahead. to what is going to become like the present day for the book. And we're getting the story in present day, but we're also getting the book in flashbacks leading up to what actually happened to Corey at this party. And then we go even farther back as we start learning more about Angela's grandmother. And throughout this book, Angela has to confront some real horrors. Not only, you know, try to live through the trauma of what has now happened to her. The death of her son has completely changed her life, but now she's really grappling with her ancestral past and the things that have happened. I feel like anytime I talk about The Good House or Tananarive do, I just turn into this rambling fangirl. I am so in awe with the way the story unfolds, and that sense of dread throughout this book, it just builds and builds and builds to the point where you like feel sick sometimes kind of reading it because you're just waiting for something else to happen. And sometimes Tananarive do will drop in foreshadowing and like tell you very clearly what's about to happen, but it's still like, you just still feel weird like while you're reading it. I love this book so much. It is so good. If you all have not read anything by Tananarive Due yet, highly recommend The Good House. And also you'd have to check out My Soul to Keep. They are both phenomenal. Next, let's get into a trilogy that you all have heard me talk about a lot this year. But just in case there's some new eyes on this video, this is the first time you're seeing me talk about the Wayward Pines trilogy by Blake Crouch. I finished out this trilogy a few months ago. This is so good. This is so good, you guys. I think this entire trilogy would make such a perfect fall read. Not only is Wayward Pines just so creepy and atmospheric, as the trilogy goes on and you know, finally get to the third book, The Last Town, Blake Crouch starts throwing in so many different elements. We get action and almost thriller-like things happening. Some horror elements start happening in book 3. It is amazing how tripped out this series gets as you keep reading it. The basic setup for the Wayward Pines trilogy is our main character, Ethan Burke. He is sent to the town of Wayward Pines in Idaho on this assignment to figure out what happened to 2 other of his fellow agents who went missing in this town. But once he's there and walking around and talking to the locals, you are uneasy the entire time. Everybody's just weird. The whole vibe is eerie. I think if you are a fan of something like Twin Peaks or Alan Wake, you would really get on with this book. But there is such a strong mystery at the heart of the first book because you're trying to figure out what the heck is going on in Wayward Pines. And I cannot speak for anybody else, but when I reached the end of this book, I was very shocked. I had theories about what I thought was happening in Wayward Pines, why everything was so weird, but what actually ended up happening was just, it was not on my bingo board. I would say if I had to rank them, I do at this point love, I think, book 1 and book 3 equally. I think book 3 does such a great job of wrapping things up and just gets just absolutely nuts as the book goes on. So I do love 1 and 3, but I would rank 1 first and then 3, and then I would put 2. And it's not that 2 is bad or anything. I still really enjoyed the second book, Wayward. But throughout Wayward, you now know what's going on in Wayward Pines. So it's more of like a let's figure out what to do now kind of story. So you're just kind of following the characters as they try to figure out their next steps and what to do. And then just all hell breaks loose in book 3. So I think the Wayward Pines trilogy is such a fantastic fall read. If you have not read this series already, it is so much fun. Next, I'm going to recommend a horror novella, which is The Scourge Between Stars by Ness Brown. This is a book I read, I think back in April. I read an arc of this book, and when I finished the novella back in April, I did like it, but it was a book that I was, you know, still kind of lukewarm about. I didn't love anything in particular. I didn't dislike anything in particular. It was just like, it was good. But now that it's sat with me all of these months, I actually have more of an appreciation for it and just how creepy and gruesome and brutal it was. So if you do like sci-fi horror and this one hasn't been on your radar, I do recommend checking this one out. We have our main character who is an interim captain on this ship, and she's trying to get her people back down to earth, but she's also suffering with a ton of anxiety. Things are just not going right on the ship. People are very close to starving, and the tension throughout the ship is just heightened. But everything just gets so much worse when something invades the ship and starts picking people off. But this is so intense, it's so brutal, and it's really gruesome too. There are a couple of moments that just are flat out gory. So I think if you like the movie Alien and the video game Prey, this would really work for you. So if you haven't read it already, I think this is worth adding to your TBR for spooky season. And then next is my favorite fantasy series of all time. Not one of, it is my favorite of all time. It's the Greenbone saga by Fonda Lee. I'm so happy to be able to talk about this again. I think this is such a perfect series to curl up with, to lose yourself in this part of the year. I do think I associate this trilogy though with colder weather because I did read books 1 and 3 in December. I don't need to tell you guys, I've talked about the Greenbone saga so much over the course of my channel. This series just has such a special place in my heart. And I'm reaching a point now where I'm not even asking you to read the series anymore if you haven't done so already. I'm on my knees now. I'm begging you. If you have not read the Greenbone saga, go read the Greenbone saga. The character work over the course of this trilogy is unreal. The family dynamics, the loyalty, the action, the politics throughout this entire trilogy. I will stand 10 toes down. This is the best fantasy series I've ever read. It really is. The Greenbone saga is the best fantasy series I've ever read. I love these characters so much. These books are chunky, so if you are looking for a long, completed trilogy to lose yourself in this fall season, please let it be the Greenbone saga. I will leave links to other videos where I've talked about the Greenbone saga so you can get a full picture of the series, but it's unmatched. It is incredible. Next is another of my favorite books that I read last year, and that is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and this is the 1818 text. I was blown away by how much I fell in love with this book. I had never read Frankenstein before, never had to read it in school, and this left such an impact on me that I still find a little bit hard to put into words. This is such a great novel. I'm not going to go into detail or anything. I will leave a link to my best books of the year video because I'm sure everybody's heard of Frankenstein. You're familiar with the story of Frankenstein, but if you have not read the book, like, just please go check it out. It is just such an amazing reading experience as you get deeper into not only the life and the psyche of Dr. Frankenstein, but also, you know, the feelings of the monster and how he interacts with the world, how people respond to him. It is just such a heartbreaking, but also really beautiful and haunting book. And I think this is a great time of year to curl up with Frankenstein. So if you have not read this book, but have been curious about it, I think this is amazing. And then last but not least, this final recommendation is not a surprise to anybody who has been on this channel for longer than a year. That is Night Film by Marisha Pestle. This is my yearly recommendation. I save it for the end every single year. This is one of my favorite books of all time, and I just think it is perfect for the fall season. This book has a way of pulling you in and consuming your thoughts and your life in a way few books have ever done for me in my life. The rundown of it is we have this director, Cordova. He is iconic, but his movies are incredibly bleak. They're so dark that they can't be shown anywhere anymore. But this director, he has a cult following, and his fans, they dissect his films. They show red band screenings of his movies. They, you know, show them in secret. These fans, they are unhinged, and they try to find meaning in every little shot, everything that's done in his films. It is just, it's a little wild. So the director's daughter, Ashley Cordova, the book starts when she is found dead in a warehouse in New York City. And we have our main character, who is a reporter who is trying to get to the bottom of what actually happened. But he does have history with Cordova because in his coverage of Cordova, he became a disgraced journalist. And so now, though, he's back and trying to get to the bottom of what happened to Ashley. But in doing so, he gets wrapped up in this director's cult following. Oh my God. And as the book goes on, as the reader, you feel like you are part of this cult too. You feel like these movies are real. You feel like you've seen them. You feel like you've been to a screening of them, and you just spiral. Your mind spirals trying to put pieces together, figuring out what happened to Ashley. I love this book. I love this book. It's set in October in New York City. So every year we always get new people to the channel who've never seen me talk about this book before. So I am sorry to the people who've been here for like 4 years and they're like, oh my God, here she goes again with Night Film. But if you're new here and you haven't heard me talk about Night Film, or you haven't heard of Night Film, you haven't read Night Film, go read Night Film. So that is it for me, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Let me know down in the comments if you have read any of these, if you plan to, which books you have on your, you know, fall and spooky season TBR. I want to hear about it. And I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.